Hey, Pat McCardle back for another episode of Shop Talk, where today we're going to do a little compare and contrast on the new Pro R versus the new Maverick R, and tell you a few of the things we like about each vehicle, maybe some of the things that are a little different. And just to be clear, I'm 100% a Polaris employee. I'm a RZR guy, so I am going to be definitely a little biased here. So these are my opinions. Just want to make sure I'm, upfront with everybody from the get-go. So from an exterior point of view, obviously you can see the style of these two vehicles is dramatically different, right? This Pro R looks like a lot of the top-end RZR models between the Pro XP, the Turbo R, and the Pro R. The style's been out for a couple years now. It was a little polarizing when it first launched, but more and more people have been liking this look as the power, the performance, the capability of these machines have grown. As we look at the Maverick over here on the other side, the Maverick R, it does carry some of the classic X3 style lines that we've seen in the past, but the front end is much more compact on this vehicle. It is a lot wider, so it looks a little more snub-nosed on the front. Obviously, the suspension bits sticking out are very visual cues in the front end. And it's kind of a like it or hate it. I'll say in person, I like it a little less than I did when I first saw it online, just because of how snub-nosed this thing is. I think as we look at roll cages, the one-piece fully welded cage on the Pro R, this is the strongest cage we've ever put on a RZR. Yes, it bolts to the chassis, but from, kind of this body line up, this is all one weldment, the entire roll cage. So it's a super stout, super strong cage, styling's great on it, and it's covered by a metal roof. So we've got an aluminum roof on the RZR here as well. So really stylish, nice and sleek, kind of curves back, gives it that nice fastback look. When we go over to the Maverick R over here, this is a bolted together cage. So bolts to the main frame like most, but if you can get your camera up, you might be able to see where it bolts, kind of on either side, where the center structure goes across, these side parts. So that cage does bolt together on the Maverick R, which is different than the Pro R. Poly roof on this one, so plastic roof. Obviously, it's the ability to get some styling cues into it, but it does look a little bit bigger. One of the other things while we're here on the Maverick R that is not my favorite is these giant intakes that are behind the seats. So if you look at this blocks a hell of a lot of the view coming off your rear view mirror when you're trying to see somebody behind you. And even when you're trying to turn your head over for backing up, you can't really see much of anything out behind the seats. You're kind of reliant on the rear view camera here to see what's behind you, and it's very difficult when you're not used to it. When you come over on the Pro R here, we've actually got an intake under the hood that's drawing fresh air up for the front, as well as the intakes in the back here. So you get a nice wide open view, to see behind you when you're sitting in the driver's seat. And same deal, there's also a reverse camera on this one with ride command, so it's pretty easy to be able to see behind you. And if you turn your head, yes, some of your view gets blocked by this panel, but you can at least see kind of around it a little bit, so backing up is easier, at least from my point of view, on the Pro R. All right, so I jumped in the interior of this Pro R, and obviously I am used to this seating position. It fits me like a glove. I got the seat adjusted, I got my harness strapped in, I've got the steering wheel tilted and pulled toward me like I like it. Everything is within reach. That's really what I love about this RZR interior, right? I got headlight, all-wheel drive switches here, got my drive modes that I can get to, shifter handles, easy to get to, steering wheel button so I don't have to take my hands off when I want to adjust the audio or my dynamics, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But the other big one for me is my ability to store stuff in the interior here. So I've got a nice, center area that I can drop a phone in the back. I've got a USB cable I can charge. I can fit a few other things like my spare gloves in there. I got another box over on the passenger side that I can fit my toolkit from the factory along with other things. It's a pretty nice big area. I've also got a center console one here, so I've got another 12-volt port here. I've got an ability to fit a few other things, along with a pair of cup holders here. In front of the shift handle, you can see I got some more room here that I can grab, another couple things, to go on the trail. And then on the side of this console, there's actually a whole nother cubby on the passenger side that I like to throw things like a toe strap or stuff I don't use very often, but it's handy to have with me. So when you look at the interior, there's a lot of storage on the Pro R, and everything is ergonomically set to be right where I need it. So I'm gonna be super confident as I ride. Pedal location's good. I got a dead pedal and a throttle that are aligned, so my hips stay in plane. I mean, overall, this interior is really nice on the RZR. So with that, let's jump over to the Maverick and check that one out next. So getting in, there's a couple things that I really don't like about getting into this thing. Now, clearly I'm not wearing a helmet because we're inside and just showing a few things off. But when I'm actually riding and I have a helmet that sticks out from my head, I smoke it on this cage almost every time I get in and out. And this hard plastic on the edge of the seat is really very uncomfortable because I end up having to sit on it every time I get in, even when I got the steering wheel kind of as far out of the way as possible. So you notice, even when I try and get my butt all the way in, I'm literally right on that hard seat edge. And I got to kind of lift up to get myself in and around it. You know, from a harnessing perspective, you probably noticed that I was wearing 6 points on the RZR. So I had hips and thigh straps, which secure you into the machine a bit better. Here, we just have 4-point harnesses. So you got, you know, hips and then retractors on the shoulders. So the shoulder retractors are similar. This has got one on each. The RZR actually has one single one down low to keep it from unwanted engage. Tilt and tilly is the same on the both. Basically, you've got some buttons on the steering wheel here as well. We'll talk about that in the technology section. One of the other things that's, you know, we talked about just a little from the interior is just like the visibility. Yes, this one does have a mirror so you can see behind you, but it gets blocked by all this stuff back up in here. So it's very hard to see behind it. And when you try and back up and look out, like you really can't see anything back out over your shoulder. You're highly reliant on the rear camera on this one. From a storage perspective, there's really not a ton. You got a little bit of storage here along with some, you know, outlets. I think this piece of foam is probably so you can stick a phone in there, but eventually I'm guessing I'm going to lose that. There's also a tiny little box over here that really only fits the factory toolkit. And I don't know if this one's missing a latch or it came out, but this thing kind of just flops around on the trail when you drive this sucker. So that's a little disheartening as well. There is a little bit of center console storage in the middle here as well, kind of like we talked about spot for a strap, but it is a little smaller on the Maverick R versus the Pro R. The rest of the things that you need to reach out and touch, you know, some of the switches on the dash, the center stuff, all of that is in pretty good reach. So I think from an ergonomics layout perspective, you know, where my legs and feet are, my right foot's a little farther to the inboard side on this Maverick than it is on a RZR. So I do feel like my hips are always a little out of place where the steering wheel's right in front of me, but my throttle pedal is kind of inboard a little extra. So it does get me a little cocked off in that regard, but overall, I don't think I'd mind that for short rides. Maybe all day long, I'd feel a little, you know, hip tension from driving around like that. But overall, you know, from a seat angle perspective, this one is a little more laid back. Now we've got this one in the furthest most upright position right now. And I still wish it was a little more upright. There's not another hole that I can adjust. The RZR's actually at the midpoint, and that's pretty good. So you can actually rock that seat forward or back. So you get a little more adjustability out of the tilt angle on the RZR than you do on this Maverick. So I think we kind of talked about, you know, those things from a sightlines perspective. It's actually pretty good over the hood on this. They're, I'll say, close to equal. I think with enough time, I'd get a sense of where that front passenger tire is. The front driver's side, you know, like both of these, you can look out and actually see where that one's tracking. So that's not too bad. But overall, you know, the other thing I'll say that, you know, is pretty nice is the size of the steering wheel. Both of these have pretty small, compact steering wheels, and the ability to operate the buttons without having to let go of the wheel is pretty nice as well for changing some of the modes that this vehicle has that we'll talk about in the technology section. All right, since I'm already sitting in the Maverick R, we're gonna dive into tech next. So let's start out, because some of this stuff was a little new to me trying to figure out the first time I jumped in this thing. So from a shift perspective, we've got a lever here for reverse and drive. Park, neutral, low, and high are all push buttons, and the override to go backwards. This is actually pretty easy to use. I'll give them props. This is not bad, not hard to use. The one area I don't like it is when you get in a really technical slow speed crawl, like you're going up something and you gotta jam it to reverse quick. Because you have to put your foot on the brake to be able to shift, you can't do that maneuver quickly. And you know, normal trail riding, that's not a big deal, but if you're getting in real highly technical, like rock crawling areas, being able to just grab that shift lever and slip it back, you know, or being able to even shift it without holding the foot down on the brake can be a big deal at times in some of those gnarly areas. The other one, this center screen, you know, it's a big 10-inch display. It's a very widescreen format. It does look nice, but I'll tell you, the one thing I don't like is the fact that I have to download this BRP Go app, plug in my phone to be able to even get navigation to show up. So one area I don't like is all around navigation. The other one, on all these different modes, the buttons are very close to each other for the throttle modes, the steering, the drive line, the front diff lock, and this combination one. You pretty much need to set this stuff before you start driving, because if you're going any rate of speed, even though you can do some of it on the steering wheel, you can tap the buttons. To be able to navigate through this takes a lot of mental effort until you get used to it. So I think the learning curve on this is a little higher than I'd love to see personally, but I also am biased because I know Ride Command really well, so I'm used to the controls on a RZR. From an audio perspective, it looks as though you would find audio controls when you toggle through some of these menus, like this, where I have audio up and down, but this vehicle doesn't actually come with any speakers built in. So unless you got a Bluetooth headset, there really isn't audio from the factory on this rig like there is on the RZR, and we'll show you that in just a minute. But overall, I'll say reach, tech, from that perspective, like the shifting is actually pretty easy to do. So I think let's go over to the RZR and do a quick dive on that one too. So I bounced over and we're talking tech and interior on the RZR. So you can see, nice bolstered seat. I don't have a big piece of plastic coming up to bang me in the leg every time I get in and out. Both of these seats hug you fairly well. Obviously I like the upright seating position a little more in this one. From a ride command perspective though, and a mapping, you can see I'm able to pull up a map here even without having my phone connected. I can see where all the trails are, makes it really easy to be able to get around. In that regard, I've got some buttons. It's really intuitive. We've done other episodes on this, easy to get. And my suspension is right here in the steering wheel, so I don't ever have to take my hands off to be able to adjust up for those different modes. From a drive modes perspective, I got a separate switch for throttle modes with my right hand. I've got headlights and my drive modes on my left hand, so I can separate those things out mentally if I need to adjust that on the fly while I'm going. I can do a quick reach down, flip that switch, and keep boogieing down the trail. Shifting pattern, again, we talked about that. The nice thing about this straight throw is if I am climbing up something and I need to go a quick reverse, I can easily pop that shifter into the gear I need. And the other thing that's cool here is I actually have the ability to listen to factory audio. So speakers and amps are built in on this rig. We've got a nice Rockford sound system with our partners there on RZR. I don't have to let go of the steering wheel. I can adjust that. I can tune that up. I can listen to different sources, AM, FM, Bluetooth, USB, whatever you want. Whereas on the Maverick, that's actually an accessory just to put speakers in. None of those come with them, whereas all these Pro Rs are set up, right from the factory with built-in factory audio. So it's a nice add that we've got on the RZR side. So I think, from the tech side, mapping's easy, audio's there, switch locations are easy and intuitive. It's really a simple package, makes it easy to get in, turn the key and go. So next we're jumping into suspension. And obviously this is an area where we've got dramatically different looks on these two vehicles. So if we start with the Pro R, we have built this front end to be super beefy and super capable. Obviously this is our version with the Dynamics active suspension. And we've got these huge 3-inch bodied shocks up front. So you do get the biggest front shock on the RZR versus the 2.5 on the Maverick R. You can just see how much beef is in these arms, especially this lower one. With the shock mounting down to that, this thing is built to take some abuse. And those lower arms are super capable, assuming you don't run into, gigantic fixed obstacles that aren't going to move like a boulder on the trail. This thing is also really capable of taking some square-edged hits. So if you go through, a little washout that's, a little bit wider than the wheel, the RZR's going to dance right through it, and it's going to be super confidence-inspiring and capable as you go. Now, obviously, this upper link is very dramatically different looking on the Maverick R, right? The one thing I will say that surprised the heck out of me is the tire actually rubs on this upright here, and I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but kind of on both sides, not quite enough clearance between the sidewall of the tire and that big aluminum casting or forging there. I think from a steering side of view, both of these have the ability to have adjustable steering. Tie rods are, obviously really beefy looking on the Maverick where you can see them, but when you get closer into the rack assembly, they do neck way down, so their failure point is smaller and closer to the rack and pinion itself. And if we come to the back, we also do have this max link suspension on the Pro R. So where you see through the rear trailing arm here, we've got this, different colored link. That's actually controlling the toe, right? So the steering angle of the rear tire, basically. And that is adjustable. If you ever get one that gets, you got to readjust because it's got some wear, or you took it apart and put it back together. It's pretty easy to do. You can string it up or take it to an alignment shop. If you go over to the Maverick R, on the other hand, they also run a toe link in the back, but it looks, in the rear of the machine. So to adjust that, you basically loosen one of these up, spin the bar, and that can adjust the rear toe on this thing. So just a different way of doing it. Again, they've got this, highly visible third link. This is the equivalent of the upper radius rod on the RZR. But other than that, both are trailing arm suspensions, both are running 3-inch bodied shocks in the back, and both are really highly capable. To be quite frank, in big bump compliance, the Pro R is awesome. I mean, you can dance with this thing at high speeds through little chatter bumps all the way up to really big stuff. The Maverick does pretty good on those big bumps as well, but when you get in the little chatter, it gets a little more upset. And the front end tends to feel numb in the steering. So I tend to like having really high levels of assist so that I don't get fatigued throughout the day. But the Maverick actually gets a little numb in the front end, and you can't always tell where your wheels are. The other thing I don't love about this package right now is that it is a little bit wider. It's about a little over 78 inches wide versus 74 on the RZR. And when you're going down trails that have been grooved out from, all the 65 to 72 to 74 inch machines, the Maverick tends to, dance back and forth as one wheel drops in the wheel groove and the other one's always fighting that. So when you're out in the sand, probably not a problem, but for normal trail riding, the RZR actually does a lot better because it fits those grooves that are out in the desert in wide open areas. So overall, I think from a consistency of handling perspective, both of these machines actually do really good. They're both point and shoot. Like where you turn that wheel and hold it, it's going to track to it, but it's a little more numb feeling on the Maverick R than it is on the Pro R. I do like kind of how both operate, I'll say, but it took me a little getting used to going through the trails to really turn in, and then sometimes I had to wait for the Maverick before it would react, where the RZR pretty much starts pulling right away. So part of that might be due to the drive mode you're in at the time. The RZR, I know when I flip it to all the way four-wheel lock, all four wheels are pulling, whereas with the electronic front end of the Maverick, in that trail active mode, it's engaging and disengaging the clutch packs on the two front wheels, so it's not always as consistent as I'd like, but it does work pretty good. I'll give them props there. All right, so the fifth thing we want to talk about is all about engine and power delivery, how that engine, power is connected to the wheels. So on this Pro R, we've actually got an inline 4-cylinder, 2-liter engine pumping out 225 horsepower. The beauty of it being naturally aspirated is you've got instant throttle control. The instant you tip in, this thing will get moving. And again, you do have the ability to switch those throttle modes so you can make it a little lazier or a little more performance oriented depending on how you like to drive. This is got a rubber belt CVT drive up in front of the engine that connects back to the gearbox here in the back. And again, you've got a manual shift linkage coming back for that park reverse, neutral, low, and high. So you always command the gear that you're in. The clutches, the beauty of the CVT system on this is that it always keeps the engine in that sweet spot of operating band. So you kind of just ride up into the torque peak and you don't have to think about what gear you're in. It handles that for you. So whether you're on off the throttle, whether you're pulling big, runs up olds out in the dunes, this thing kind of always is in the right location and you don't have to think about it. You shift that thing into gear, stomp on the pedal, and away you go. Makes it really easy to drive. It's very predictable, and it's kind of always in the power band that you want it to be in, and it's very snappy. It's very responsive with this inline 4. Now, if we move over to the Maverick R, I'll actually give the Can-Am guys props on this new DCT transmissions. They put a dual clutch in this thing, and it actually, honestly, works pretty good. So they've got a turbocharged 3-cylinder engine pumping out 240 horse, and they've got 3 different modes. When you're in the normal mode, it is pretty sluggish. You do notice the turbo lag, but when you bump it up into the Sport Plus, it bangs the idle speed up to like 2,200 RPM, does some other tricky electronics tech to be able to spool the turbo, and they do a really nice job of eliminating the lag. So in that regard, depending on which of those drive modes you're in, you can go from pretty laggy like you'd expect in a turbo to almost no lag at all. When you're in the automatic modes for the driveline here, it actually does a pretty good job of figuring out what gear you want to be in. About the only place that it got confused on me was when I was in really on-off hard throttle areas with a lot of tight corners. There were times where I'd come into a corner, be a gear higher than I wanted, and I'd have to manually grab the lever to actually downshift to be able to hold that gear through a corner and not feel like I was lugging the motor down. But overall, straight line acceleration runs, it's a snappy shifting. That part does pretty good, but I don't think I'd use the paddles, honestly, very much at all, just downshifts once in a while in tight terrains. The one thing I don't like, though, is for that technical driving, the low gear makes it nice for rock crawling, so you can get up with a lot of slow speed control. But when you get in those spots where you're going up and you got a quick shift to reverse or vice versa, yes, the shifter is set up to just be drive in reverse, but because you got to hold the brake pedal down and it takes a bit to clunk its way to the other gear, that's the one area that I really don't like this setup for. So I think if all you're doing is running wide open high speed, you're going to be happy with the way the driveline performs here. You're going to be really happy with the way the RZR performs as well. But I think for some of those slow speed, really technical rock areas, I give the tip to the RZR for sure, because I have the ability to switch directions really fast and be able to get myself out of a jam. So overall, my pick of these two machines for sure is the Pro R. Obviously, I'm a Polaris, I'm a RZR guy. But when I think about those 5 areas, exterior, interior, suspension, technology, engine and driveline, we pointed out the areas that I like a lot about the RZR. The one-piece cage, the better seats, the 6-point harnesses, the fact that I don't need my phone connected to see the maps, the live valve, the super beefy lower control arms, the suspension performance, And the fact that when I shift this thing into gear, I can quickly move to other gears if I need to in technical terrain, and that CVT always compensates and keeps me in the power band right where I want to be, and I don't have to worry about thinking about slapping a paddle to get myself in a different gear. So overall, my pick for sure is the Pro R. I hope you guys maybe learned a thing or two. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you want to see. Maybe let us know what you agree with and what you don't. See you next time.